Hi, I'm Luke Searveld. Welcome to another episode of Meet the Gaffer. Today looks familiar, right? It's not an XR stage, it's just green screen. It's a setup all of us can do in our sleep. We're not even doing head to toe. So sometimes on straightforward days like this, I like to give myself a little challenge. Try something different. Use new units instead of units I've used before for the exact same scenario. Here we're using Nanlux 1200C through an 8x8 of Magic Cloth as our main source, and then that wraps around the face just enough to pick up the second eye. So now we have the Nanlux 650C through a 6x of Magic Cloth for the fill, but if we were to take that out, then you see we've got this sort of dramatic look, just coming around to the second eye, and we fill in there, so it's just not quite so dramatic because the mood of this piece is, upbeat and positive. Now, we've had male and female talent, and to be clear, on the female talent, we have boosted the fill a little bit more, and we've also brought in a little uplight here in the front. That's just sort of a more traditional thing. Here's showing up in my glasses, but and we had a dark, black wardrobe, and so we needed to boost that a little bit. But that's often sort of a beauty light thing, maybe put a bounce below, and that's typically a female thing, but doesn't have to be. It's just like that's sort of historical. Maybe that'll change, but at the moment, that's how things are often run. Anyway, I'll take down that little front piece there. Men and women often have a little difference in hair. Often women have more hair that comes around to the front, whereas men, have often shorter hair, and so edge lights work better on skin with shorter hair. Again, it doesn't have to be a male-female difference, but something that you come across. Now, adding to this, we've got some KinoFlow Freestyle 41s with DOP choice snap bags for potential scratches, edges, and a Freestyle 31 with a snap bag, snap grid for a soft hair light. Just as an aside, when I was coming up, often I'd be working on small crews. You'd have an airy kit, and you'd set up your key, you set up maybe a fill, and then your backlight was the smallest unit left in the case. It was often a 300 or a 150, inky style, and just that little small point source as a backlight. And so when you're not having to travel and keep things in a small case for flying, it's nice to have broader soft backlights. And in this case, the Kino Freestyle is a perfect tool. Now, I've also added some Q5s. So these are Felix Q5s, just small Fresnels, in the event that we have a background that sort of references stronger shafts of light or just a harder edge. So we could bring those up. So just a little bit of an edge on the arms when it's motivated in the background that gets added later. Now, all these units are RGB, and we're in a stage that has pre-hung 2K space lights. So we could just go with a warm white base, but because the frame is relatively tight and our camera choice is a red, I offered to go with a cooler daylight base. And people said, yeah, let's do that. So we were able to do that easily by adding two airy S60C sky panels on left and right for a nice even wash on the background. And because we needed a little more level on the floor, we pinned up the diffusion just enough to leak some harder light down there where we needed it. Yes, it's just another run-of-the-mill green screen, but we changed it up just enough to make it interesting for us. And we're using the Apollo Bridge again as the transmitter between the blackout control software on this iPad and the wireless units. Now, the Nanlux and KinoFlow units have lumen radio built in, whereas the Airy and Felix units require third-party receivers. That's where Centennas and Sky Nodes come in handy. We're not doing any wild effects or even simple lighting transitions, but being able to quickly tweak units remotely for each new talent is a very handy thing. Now, using an Exelux Control 1, a Gaffer's Control, or iPad software like Luminaire or Blackout Lighting Console to figure out the basics of wireless lighting is a good first step to learning how to run larger consoles. But more importantly, it makes you a valuable asset in this fast-changing production environment. Another huge bonus with wireless control is that once talent steps on stage, I can stand with the DP and director at the monitor and tweak each light. So that's time that they're not waiting on us going to each individual light, changing it, or telling someone else to go there, then calling someone in. Being able to do that remotely, how valuable that is to the director, producer, and DP. And it makes it easier on talent without having people nearby fussing with fixtures. I'm just an old guy trying to keep up. Most of you take to this stuff like ducks to water. So have fun out there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time. Just a few more notes about this job. Over the years, when I've worked at this stage, it's called Meets the Eye, and it's in San Carlos. It's like 5 minutes from my house. I love it. But normally, when we're shooting green screen, we go tungsten because of the space lights. Alan Steinheimer and I actually hung those space lights years ago. And so if you're seeing a lot of green floor, then space lights are great because they're not only doing the back wall, but they're also doing the floor because you're lighting those people with the same light. It's not separate on the back as on the people. No, it's all lighting everything in a sense. So space lights is perfect for that situation. Just a lot of overall ambient light. And so then we would just bring in the key sources, the fill and key. And so normally, if you needed a fair amount of coverage, we'd get some bigger units. We bring in some maxis, some maxi 9s, maxi 12s, and put a bunch of them up, either bounce them and soften it, as a book light, or anyway. So that was sort of my normal approach. But then over the years, depending on where I was with equipment or what the production had, what they could afford, I brought in different lights. And sometimes it was just like, let me see what I can do with what I've got. If you don't have a lot of budget, let me just use my lights, so we're not sub-renting, and then I can give you, a little bit of a break on things. Once I built up one source side with all smaller tungsten units behind a big softener, and then on the other side, all LED units. And I think at the time, Alan had just gotten his orbiters. So I had an orbiter in there too, with some panel lights, trying things out. So kind of that challenge yourself. If it's a basic shoot and you're just trying to get soft coverage for people on green screen, then sometimes I like to mix it up. So anyway, that's sort of the behind there. Now, when I came in for this job, there were already some 20 by 20 solids hanging in front of the green. And so the stage manager's like, you want me to get rid of those? I was like, actually, no. Why don't you just get rid of one of them so we'll have some green to shoot against, and then leave the rest because then we don't have that green spill. And so, just make it simple. And we left the floor coverings there for the most part and just used the swatch of green that we needed. Now, with the Nanlux units, I thought I'd have more than enough light. So I could go through as soft of a diffusion as possible. So that's where the Magic Cloth came in. And yeah, I could have bounced, that would have been even softer. But hey, go through Magic Cloth, figured that was a pretty good place to start. And then we had started lighting, and then camera put on quite an aggressive LUT that was actually like 2 stops of more light needed. And luckily had those good sized Nanluxes with some nice output, and zoop. So for one of the talent, we were at 100% on the 1200C, and then there was someone with a little lighter skin, and we came down to like 80%. And on the fill side, on the 650C, still going through Magic Cloth, but we didn't need as much, so I think we were like at 50%. But it was nice to have that output available. And, the explanation, I'm not going to get this quite right, but for having that aggressive LUT is that in post, then, you've got the highlights covered. And so, there's you're giving yourself even that much more latitude to play with. I don't know. Maybe I don't have that right. Anyway, then as far as the green was concerned, we had it at a little higher level than I would normally put it. I would like put it maybe a stop lower, or just a bump lower, maybe at 40 IRE, rather than we were probably in the 50ish, little 50 plus IRE, and so pretty close to skin tone, which maybe you'd have at 65 or so. Well, that was an ask from the production company. They're like, hey, our compositor wants us to have a pretty robust green in terms of level, so that works out best for us. It's like, right on. So that was because often I'm doing green on a smaller scale. I'm doing green with Kinoflows, and here we had the sky panel, so a little extra boof available, and we could soften it as well as open it up and get a little more on the bottom. So anyway, just some extra notes. Your mileage may vary. This was my experience in this job.